Great. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us and Fortinet in today's webinar. So my name is Ahmed Abrahal. I'm a technical product manager for Integrity 360, and I'm joined today by Malcolm from Fortinet, who will be talking about the Forti Deceptor and the latest of the deception technology. Malcolm?
Hi there, everyone. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. So just, quick introduction. So in Integrity 360, we offer a large portfolio of services starting from advisory and technology selection, professional services to managed services. And just as an introduction, so Malcolm, sorry, if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so as an introduction, so one of the managed services that we provide with Fortinet as our strategic partner is the Fortinet managed security fabric. So it's a managed service from Integrity 360 that, as you can see, covers a large part of Fortinet portfolio. So that's provided 24/7 from our 4 SOCs in Dublin, Stockholm, Naples, and Sofia. And we have more than 20 really NSE certified engineers who look after our Fortinet managed service customers. So after that small, let's say, commercial, I'll hand over to Malcolm so that we can get to the our webinar. Thanks, Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks, Ahmed. So we have quite a few people registered on the webinar, or for the webinar today, and so we probably still have a few people trying to log in. I can see the numbers going up. So what I want to do is just maybe hold off for 1 minute while we wait for people to register, and then commence the presentation in about a minute or so. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I'll just give a bit of an introduction to myself. My name is Malcolm Orekoya, and I work within the channel team at Fortinet as a systems engineer. Been there for about a year and a quarter now. Been in the industry for about 22 years for my sins, mostly in networking and cybersecurity. Worked across various value-added resellers, across various vendors, across managed security service providers as well, end user environments around retail and manufacturing as well. So I've kind of been around the block, done the end user bit, the reseller bit, the vendor bits, and obviously worked across with big distribution partners as well. So yeah, been around the block a while for the last 20 odd years. With a few more people registered, I don't want to sort of waste too much time. I've seen a few more people registered. So what I'm going to try and do, well, first of all, what we're doing with Integrity 360 is running through a series of webinars over the next couple of months that are we're kind of going to focus on security or security operations. And on this particular webinar being the first of, I think, about 3, potentially 4, we'll send out notifications about the upcoming ones as well. We're going to focus on deception technology and talk about the importance of it and what Fortinet does in this space. But before I do that, I wanted to set the context of the industry and where we are. I'm probably teaching a lot of people that are probably a few years in the industry like myself, things that they already know. But it's good to set that high-level context before delving into the particular product. So I'll start with that and talk about the various issues that we're facing at the moment in our industry. Well, when it comes to security, one of the biggest issues that we have in our industry is a skills gap. We don't have enough people to deal with all the security challenges that we have. So there have been lots of statistics that have been done by different organizations such as ESG that give us all the different numbers that you see on the screen. 41% rapidly evolving threat landscape, which we're very familiar with. As I said, the skills shortage, 39%, the attack surface continuously changing and evolving. 37% the volume and complexity of attacks is increasing, as well as the alerts as well. which a lot of analysts and guys and girls that work within the Security Operations Center would know all too well. And of course, the top one there, 52% of IT and security professionals say that SecOps is becoming more and more difficult. So with that context, let's sort of highlight maybe some of the top three, in my opinion, issues that we've been facing across our industry over the last 10 years or so. This is not going to be new to anyone. Ransomware is one of the biggest issues that we've been facing in the industry, but they've also been evolving over time as well. They're becoming more targeted rather than just a spray and pray kind of approach. So people are looking at specific verticals. They're looking at specific individuals within those verticals. And as a result of that, they're reducing their infection time. So as you can see on the screen there, 2021, 5.5 days, faster infection times going down all the way to, I think it's something around 5 or 6 hours now in 2024. This is one of the reasons why we have to leverage technology. I don't want to use the most famous words in the industry now, being artificial intelligence, but it does have its place. And over the next 10, 15, 20 years or so, we ultimately do have to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence in order to combat these bad actors that are out there, because ultimately they are also leveraging these tools as well. Another big issue within our industry is vulnerabilities. Obviously, as a vendor, Fortinet has their own fair share of vulnerabilities, as well as other cybersecurity vendors in the industry. It's forever increasing, as it says on the screen, 24% growth between 2021 and 2022. It's an issue because patching is always a problem for organizations, especially when you start looking at organizations that are in operational technology, for example, where if they're dealing with things like critical national infrastructure, for example, it's not as easy as just setting a downtime window, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. Sometimes the infrastructure can't be put down at all or taken down at all for maintenance. And if it can, it's maybe once a year or maybe a couple of times a year. So in a lot of environments, they're actually aware that they're sitting on vulnerabilities that they are exposed to, and they have to find other ways to mitigate that risk without affecting operations. And of course, phishing, it's been the top method for attackers over the last, I would say, probably 15 plus years or so. And nothing's changed in that regard, but the evolution of phishing. We have more targeted phishing campaigns. We have more resources available to the malicious actors to use these new technologies. As I said earlier on, they are leveraging machine learning, artificial intelligence, et cetera, to do these bad acts as well. And probably most up and coming threats nowadays that people are seeing is the voice impersonations and video impersonations. If you look across usually media channels like YouTube and stuff like that, you would definitely see a lot of these video and vision campaigns that people are pushing, and they're very, very, very impressive nowadays and very difficult for you to pick out what's real and what's not. So as I said, as a baseline, over the years, we will have to leverage more and more artificial intelligence and threat intelligence databases, etc. And so that's why I've got this slide here to kind of talk about Fortinet's heritage over the last 22 years or so with our FortiGuard labs and essentially our threat intelligence analysts and database. We've been around for a while. I know AI is a buzzword now, but we have been using these technologies for decades, essentially, to enable the threat and threat protection services, basically, within our different platforms, across our different platforms as well. So not just our FortiGates, which we're very well known for, but across all of our different platforms within our three core pillars, which I'll show you later on, being secure networking, universal SASE, and security operations as well. So we have very rich contextual data that we get from this FortiGuard Labs. And to me, in my next slide, I'm going to show how this acts as the umbrella for securing a lot of the other products and services that we offer within the Fortinet security fabric. Now, in our industry today, a lot of things that drive what we're doing and how we're doing it are compliance and frameworks. NIST is one of the biggest cybersecurity frameworks out there. Within the UK as well, we have the NCSC platform or program where we have cyber assessment frameworks that we all follow, and they have other frameworks that various organizations have to follow, like telecommunications with TPA, and we have DORA for finance, etc., etc. But all of these frameworks start narrowing down onto common ways of functioning, and those common ways of functioning boil down to nowadays these 5 core areas: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. This is the framework that a lot of these organizations are drilling down to, and so you can then map the different services and solutions into those different areas. Now, one of the umbrellas that sits across all of this is being able to leverage threat intelligence and machine learning and AI, and this is where FortiGuard sits across everything on the top. The other thing that's very important within this framework is basically your ecosystem partners, people like Integrity 360, and their breadth of experience, expertise, technical and otherwise, and obviously distribution globally and across the UK as well. So what I wanted to highlight quickly here is the breadth of products that obviously Fortinet has. We have over 50 plus products that sit across different parts of the cybersecurity landscape. But I wanted to kind of show you exactly where FortiDeceptor sits and why it is important. So under the identify section, we have this threats section where we're trying to be as early as possible in the detection phase, essentially. We're trying to figure out what's happening before it actually becomes a problem. So things like FortiSandbox is looking at, zero-day malware, etc. FortiRecon is looking at your external attack surface, etc. And FortiDeceptor is looking at your internal east-to-west traffic and what is actually residing within your network. All of these things help you to identify threats early on within the attack lifecycle, or the kill chain as it's properly used within our industry. Before you then start going into other parts of the framework, such as protect, detect, respond, and working with ecosystem partners. Within all of those different areas, of course, we have products. I'm not going to talk about those products today. I'm going to focus on FortiDeceptor. But later on, I will show you how the Fortinet security fabric and a lot of the investment that you might already have in some of our solutions, like our FortiGate, AP switches, etc., SIEM, for example, can be leveraged with this particular product. So that's where FortiDeceptor sits. Now let's delve into what it is. So what is FortiDeceptor, and what is deception technology? So very simply, deception technology is trying to divert malicious actors or attackers away from your real assets, your crown jewels, your important data, and diverting them to fake assets, while engaging with those threat actors on those fake assets, trying to understand what they're trying to do and how you can lock them off from the network. Now, the way FortiDeceptor does this, we have something called decoys. Actually, we do it in 4 different ways, which is highlighted on the screen. So I'll talk about each one of them individually. So ultimately, what the product does is deploy decoys within your network. And a decoy is essentially a fake asset or fake network device or fake service that you publish within your normal production network that looks as if it's a part of your infrastructure, but is very attractive to malicious actors. And that could be malicious actors that are actively working within your environment, or already sitting within your environment, or trying to navigate themselves around your environment, whether that's manual or automated as well. So it's important to understand that. So these decoys can be pushed out on different types of systems, like Windows systems, Linux systems, pushed across different types of your parts of your infrastructure, like operational technology, standard information technology part of your network, IoT devices, etc., etc. Okay. We then have something called lures, which are essentially fake services that sit on your decoys. So, for example, something like an FTP server that's sitting on a Windows server could be an example of a lure. We then also have two other capabilities within the 40 deception tool bag, which is network traffic or fake network traffic. So what we're doing there is we are sending out or beaconing in across your infrastructure fake bits of network traffic alongside real bits of network traffic to try and make it confusing to an attacker so they can't differentiate the two. But obviously then making the fake network traffic more attractive. So the least part of resistance, generally speaking, is what the attackers will take. They want to sit within an organization's network for a while, and they want to try and figure out what's the least part of resistance. So if they see something that looks a little bit attractive here, then they're going to try and exploit that. You know, like an example would be if it looks like there's an admin credential here that can be easily hacked because, you know, someone set the password as password 1 or something like that, then they're going to move towards that path of least resistance. And that's essentially what we're doing, trying to navigate them to the typical paths of least resistance that malicious actors tend to follow within an infrastructure network. And then the final thing that we also do is tokens. So tokens can be looked at as breadcrumbs that are actually deployed on your real assets, on your real endpoint devices, basically. That are fake resources that then point back to the decoys that you've deployed within your infrastructure. Okay, and I'll drill into a lot of this late as we go on to the webinar so you get a deeper understanding of exactly how this works. But one of the things I wanted to kind of highlight before I go on is the differences between honeypots and deception technology. First of all, it's probably easier to look at deception technology as kind of like 2.0 version of honeypots. So most people that have been in the industry, maybe 10 plus years or so, will understand or have heard of what a honeypot is. But typically honeypots over the years have shown a lot of flaws, and that's what's highlighted on the screen here. Deception technology is kind of like a evolved big brother version of honeypots. So for example, the ease of deployment of honeypots historically are a lot more difficult to do than deception technology. The scalability across the different types of infrastructure. So what I mean by that is your IT, your OT, your IoT environments, as well as your different types of systems. So your Windows devices, Linux devices, Red Hat, etc., all of that is supported within deception technology and sometimes can be difficult to deal with within old honeypot systems. And then actually one of the most important ones, which is the one at the bottom is automation. I mentioned at the beginning, you know, alert fatigue, and what security operations centers and analysts within security operations centers are dealing with nowadays is very difficult to keep up with manually, and you have to embrace a lot of automation and API integrations and integrations across different vendors as well to actually make things work. And a lot of honeypot technology is not very capable of doing that either. Okay, so let's delve a little bit into how it actually works by looking at a structure, basically, or a timeline of what we typically do with a 40 Decept. So first of all, if we come into an environment, what we want to try and understand is what the environment looks like at a high level, what type of devices you have deployed within the environment, because all environments might be different. As you can imagine, maybe a manufacturing organization might be very different to a retail organization, and a retail organization will be very different to like a finance or banking organization or something like that. So what we tend to do is typically run an active or passive asset discovery within that particular organization and try and gather as much of the real assets that exist within that organization. Now, there are kind of three ways to deploy FortiDeceptor in an organization. We can have a fully automated method of deployment. We can have a semi-automated, or we can have like a manual way of doing things. Let's just say, or in an automated way, what we can do is discover what the network looks like and automatically deploy decoys and lures and network traffic and tokens within that environment that mimics everything that you have within that environment. So if you're running Windows systems and different types of services like FTP, SFTP, or different types of applications like web servers or DNS servers or whatever else you're running, and we pick that up within the discovery, we can then set up lures and decoys and tokens on your different endpoint devices to look exactly like your existing environment. And the key thing to understand with deception technology is all we're doing is leveraging your free or available IP addresses within your different segments, your different subnets within your infrastructure, to add in a device that is a fake, essentially. So we're not installing any agents on anything. Everything runs within FortiDeception platform, whether that's and I'll talk about this later, whether that's the hardware platform, the virtual platform, or the as a service platform, which are the three ways that you can consume FortiDeceptor at the moment. And then what happens then, you move into the real-time detection and threat intelligence bit. The threat intelligence bit is also very important, and I'll talk about that later on in the slide, where how some of the integration with the threat intelligence information for FortiGuard feeds into FortiDeceptor. So then you have different options after that. Once an attacker engages with a decoy within FortiDeceptor, you can then move to doing different things, whether that's blocking that attacker immediately or engaging with that attacker as well. So you could do things within FortiDeceptor that allows you to actually engage and see what that particular attacker or bad actor is trying to do, and then gather that information. And the great thing about FortiDeceptor's capabilities with doing that is it records a timeline of everything that's happening, and I can give various examples, but if you put some credentials as a token on a laptop, for example, and it picks those credentials, you could just say, oh, someone's gone to these fake tokens of admin credentials for a laptop. Let's block it straight away. Or you could actually allow it to continue and say, okay, well, these admin credentials can allow you to log into this web server, for example, which could actually be another decoy. And then that attacker successfully logs into that web server, and then we record a timeline of everything that's going on there. So hopefully that makes sense. And then ultimately, what we would want to do is either at some point stop the attack, quarantine it, or integrate with something else that will take some actionable, take some action, basically, whether that's a FortiGate or a NAC appliance or a third-party NDR, EDR, whatever it is you want to integrate with. So hopefully that makes sense. And just to give it a sort of visual representation, I have this slide, which is kind of a vague representation of what a typical environment might look like. You can see at the bottom there we have representation for an operational technology environment, where it could be power plant, windmill environment, or any type of operational technology environment. One of the key things about deception technology with operational environments is that OT environments are sometimes a lot behind IT environments for some of the reasons that I mentioned before, not being able to update, not being able to accept downtime, et cetera, et cetera. So in a scenario like this, you would deploy a deception appliance in the various 3 different ways that I mentioned, and you would then deploy decoys and lures across your infrastructure, whether that's your virtual subnets, Linux, Windows, endpoints, etc., and you can have different lures like fake databases, fake app servers, fake file servers, etc. You would also then deploy tokens and fake traffic, as I mentioned earlier, across your endpoint estate as well. And obviously, those could be endpoints that are mobile, so they could be off network or within the network, etc. And typically, you would then be able to integrate with all the other things within your environment. If you already have an orchestration environment or a SOAR environment, for example, where you're doing like security operations or automation, you can integrate with those as well. And it doesn't have to be a Fortinet product. Obviously, Fortinet integrates very nicely with its own product within our security fabric, which I'll talk about later on. But we also integrate very nicely with other third parties as well. Another thing that's quite good with FortiDeceptor is Active Directory is probably one of the most popular databases used in enterprise, and you have capabilities as well to have fake AD environments and fake AD usernames, etc. So you can really increase the level of interaction that you have with bad actors as they touch the different decoys within your environment. Okay, so hopefully how it works makes sense at a very high level. Some of the things that we're combating with Fortinet is what's been highlighted here on the screen. I gave the sort of premise at the beginning, and one of them was obviously with ransomware being quite big. So being able to detect and stop ransomware very early by recognizing when a bad actor is already sitting within your network, which is over the last few years, one of the biggest things that we've seen out of big published attacks in the media is that over 50% of them have seen the attacker already reside within the network before the attack actually took place. So it's not always that an attacker's come from outside and then broken your perimeter defense, or they suddenly found a particular vulnerability in something that you have and then deployed it. Actually, over 50% of the time, they're already within the network. They're moving laterally across your VLANs, across your switches, etc. And it's very difficult for people to detect because they have protection sitting on endpoints. They have protection sitting at perimeter, to the DC, the data center, to the cloud, etc. But if the attacker does not traverse any of these different places, then you don't know they're there. And there are statistics that have attackers sitting within your network for 6, 12, 18 months without a lot of people knowing. So all of these things that you see on the screen, being able to detect zero-day threats, get warnings before you're actually breached, dealing with unpatchable devices, whether it's because of downtime not being possible or legacy systems that don't even have security patches anymore but are still critical to your infrastructure and the way you operate. And obviously Active Directory, ZTNA, and some of those other things I mentioned as well. So hopefully I'm painting a picture of how important it is for deception-teknik technology to be integrated into your security environment nowadays. One of the beautiful things about FortiDeceptor as it stands at the moment is it doesn't interfere with a lot of what you already have. It just works alongside. It's very, very easy to deploy. As I said, for example, tokens on an endpoint, you're not affecting CPU usage or processing or anything like that, because it's not an agent. It's not anything that's consuming resources on your endpoints. Even on your network, you're not, for example, running a Windows lure, a Windows decoy with various application lures, or a Linux decoy with various application lures on your Windows or your Linux servers, right? Those Windows and Linux decoys that are running various application and services lures are sitting within FortiDeceptor itself. So if you had a FortiDeceptor physical appliance, all of those things with different IP addresses for different segments of your network, relevant to where maybe your applications sit or your Windows servers sit or your Linux servers sit, etc., they all physically reside and consume the resources of the physical hardware infrastructure of FortiDeceptor, or the VM infrastructure of FortiDeceptor, or the as a service cloud tenant of FortiDeceptor, which again is brilliant for people that don't even want to have any physical or use any VM resources within their environment. They can literally sign up to a cloud-based as a service connection. Obviously, there'll be a secure connection between your infrastructure and Fortinet's cloud environment, and then you get all of the capabilities as well. So it's very non-intrusive. It reduces dwell time, as I've mentioned before. It's very cost-effective, to be brutally honest. The total cost of ownership and the return on investment with this product is a bit of a no-brainer. And for me, over the last year and a quarter working at Fortinet, I think this is one of our best products that's not being used enough across different services that people are running or providing to their clients and across our partner ecosystem. So definitely one that I have a soft spot for. And I'm an SME, a subject matter expert for FortiDeceptor as well. So I do a lot of demos and POCs and that sort of stuff for this technology. Okay, cool. So just a couple of more slides before I get to the end, just to highlight some of the common use cases for FortiDeception. I've mentioned OT, IoT, and IT environments. Obviously, hopefully by now, it's obvious that, first of all, gaining the network visibility that we provide with the discovery at the beginning provides you the capabilities to detect your existing footprint and then try and protect against bad actors, especially where, as I said, in OT and IoT environments, some of these IoT devices, cameras and, whatever else we're using in IoT, they're very basic devices that might not have the best of firmware. They might not be able to interact like normal devices within your IoT environment, but they're still avenues by which attackers can leverage to get into your environment and create a problem for you. So also detecting threats to assets that cannot provide their own telemetry. So a lot of things that we have, for example, are endpoints, laptops and stuff like that. We can put like an endpoint agent on it and it provides like telemetry back, for example, FortiClient talking back to our EMS server, and exactly what's going on, and you can send tags of posture changes and is antivirus on, is firewall on, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of devices within IT, IoT, and OT environments that can't do any of that information, that can't provide any of that telemetry information. So obviously FortiDeceptor can protect these devices as well. Ransomware mitigation is a big one. Ransomware is still one of the big avenues by which attackers use. So being able to detect early and alert your SOC analysts and other people within your environment that something is going on, and being able to leverage the FortiGuard threat intelligence database, which obviously has all of the information around zero-day attacks, the latest malware campaigns that are happening, et cetera, is going to be of an advantage. Also, it keeps malware from encrypting real data, because if they've touched the decoy, then they haven't touched your real asset. And hopefully through what I've explained so far, there's an understanding that there's basically like there's no false positives, because if an attacker has actually hit a decoy or lure or network traffic or a token, it's because they are performing it's not something that normal users will just accidentally access, right? It's because they're running something either manually or in an automated fashion from an attacker's point of view, that they're trying to navigate their way around the network behind the scenes. And so normal users would not do that, basically. So the minute they spot something within your network that looks attractive from an attacker's point of view and they hit that particular decoy, then you know that this is not an accident. It's someone or some kind of automated script or whatever that's trying to navigate themselves in a malicious way. So you don't have any accidents, like someone's hit something that they shouldn't have or whatever. And then lateral movement can be avoided, threat hunting, as I talked about already, enabling your SOC teams, etc. So there's a lot of advantages to running FortiDeceptor within your environment. And some of the key differentiators, I think, just to highlight the last slide before I talk about our security fabric, is the integration. So there's two bits here that I wanted to kind of highlight. So we have a attack detection exchange program, basically, where everyone that signs up to FortiDeceptor is sharing anonymous information with what is being detected within the environment. So it's almost like not just our threat intelligence database that sits across everything and we get feeds from all of our devices, but also specifically those that have FortiDeception deployed globally are also feeding information and sharing information with each other, which is very important. I also mentioned at the beginning, I'll talk about this vulnerability and outbreak alert. So we have something on our FortiGuard's website, FortiGuard Labs website, which basically is called an outbreak alert. It's completely free to subscribe to. And the outbreak alert basically tells you about all the latest vulnerabilities, CVEs that are published across different vendors across the world, basically. And one of the key things that FortiDeception does, which is fantastic, is if there's a key vulnerability that's published with X, Y, and Z vendor, it's published globally, we get an outbreak alert. We can actually use FortiDeceptor to deploy a decoy to expose that vulnerability to your network so that you can validate if you have that vulnerability within your network and if there's any attackers or malicious actors within your network that are trying to leverage that vulnerability. So I don't want to name any vendors or any solutions or whatever, but hopefully that makes sense. So if something comes out and says vendor A has this vulnerability and it's CVE X, Y, and Z, we have the capability of making an outbreak alert and a FortiDeceptor decoy available within FortiDeceptor fairly quickly that you can then just go into FortiDeceptor and enable that decoy within your network, within the appropriate subnet that you want to test, etc. And then see if you get any hits, basically, which is fantastic. And then obviously one of the other things I wanted to talk about alongside the last two is the middle one, which is the integration with other platforms. Obviously, threat intelligence and SOAR, we integrate with our platform quite nicely, which leads on to the next slide. But we also integrate with a lot of other things outside of the Fortinet security fabric. So within the Fortinet security fabric, we have secure networking, universal SASE, and security operations. Some of the key parts in secure networking that we integrate with is things like our FortiGate firewalls to push block lists and firewall change policies, etc. Our network access control, which is a great NAC product, also do a great integration with that. But also within SecOps on this next slide, you'll see that we talk to different other platforms like our SOAR platform, our XDR and EDR platforms, and also third-party firewall, NAC, XDR, EDR, SOAR, etc., etc. Same way as well with telemetry data that we get from FortiGuard and sandboxing environments and SIEM logging, etc. We also can share all of that information outside of the Fortinet security fabric with other third parties as well. Second to last slide. So everyone should be familiar with MITRE Engage, which is a very popular matrix that's used within cybersecurity to look at your exposure, your effect, and how you respond, within the attack lifecycle, if you want to call it that. And the colored boxes shows how FortiDeceptor protects all of these different areas in one way or the other. Now, obviously, there's some things that are not colored, like we can't do any hardware manipulation or deal with like management of external peripheral devices, but things like network monitoring, software manipulation, API integrations, putting alerts, as I've talked about, in different parts of the network, supporting different vendor OSs, as well as different services as well, etc., etc. So this is like a nice screenshot just showing that the breadth of coverage that you get from FortiDeceptor is quite deep. And alongside that, we have independent third parties that talk about deception technology in general and start looking at some of the vendors that play in this space. As you can see on the screen, you have things like SentinelOne, Proofpoint, Zscaler, et cetera, all playing in this space in some regard or the other. But as of Q1 this year, as you can see, March 11th, the particular deception technology radar here is showing Fortinet as outperforming most other vendors in that space, not only because of the solution itself, but also because of the capabilities and integration with the security fabric and all the security fabric products within Fortinet, and also with integration with other third parties as well, because we're open API based platform, and so we can talk with a lot of other vendors as well, including our competitors as well. And that brings me to just a summary slide before I hand over to Ahmed again, which is the top one is basically why I gave the title to this webinar. How would you know if attackers are inside your network already? I think that's probably one of the most important questions, and maybe the most important question to take away from this webinar that you can ask your clients, your prospects, your partners, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, I'm protecting the perimeter. Yes, I'm protecting the endpoint. Yes, I'm protecting my cloud environments, and I have some cloud access security broker doing protection for my SaaS environment, et cetera. But what if the attacker is already within your network? How are you looking at east to west traffic? And what kind of capabilities do you have in that space? These are simple questions to ask, and that opens up conversations for deception technology. Hopefully that's made sense. I'll just open it up to questions and see if we've got any. Neve and Ahmed can filter those. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. That was so interesting, and I hope everybody got a lot out of that. I have a few questions come through. The first one is, can I use both FortiDeceptor hardware and virtual appliance on the same deployment?
Yes, you can. So obviously you have different environments within your infrastructure, and a hardware appliance or a virtual appliance might be suitable for different areas. So for example, you might be a hosting provider that you have a big hypervisor estate, whether that's VMware or Hyper-V or even cloud environment, AWS or Azure or something like that. And so in that scenario, probably the best deployment method would be having a FortiDeceptor VM sitting within those environments. So it's kind of native to that environment. And as I said earlier, you're just opening up the decoys and lures, etc., with an IP address and exposing them to that particular environment. In other environments, you might say, okay, well, that's my hypervisor and virtual estate covered, but for my physical data center maybe, or some other on-premise HQ or something like that, I want to have a physical 1U appliance sitting there with X amount of capacity, dealing with all of the deception capabilities that I need. So yes, you can run both of them at the same time, or you can pick and choose, what works best for you.
Amazing. And another question is, how is FortiDeceptor licensed? I think this actually comes in with it, is what management tools are included with FortiDeceptor for monitoring and maintaining decoy assets. So I don't know whether you can tie those two in.
Yeah, sure. So generally speaking, FortiDeceptor is licensed based on the number of VLAN. Well, first of all, the type of deployment, subscription. So whether you're buying a hardware appliance, a VM appliance, or subscribing to a as a service subscription, then the subscription then has capabilities for VLANs, essentially. So it's the number of VLANs that you are deploying deception technology onto, and VLANs are looked at as class C. So /24 is one VLAN, anything /23 down is two VLANs and upwards, that sort of stuff. And then with hardware and virtual and as a service, you have maximum capabilities in terms of number of VLANs or subnets supported. And that's pretty much it. Obviously, you have like a support and stuff like that. In terms of management, we have a central dashboard. It's cloud hosted for the, as a service, or just a standard GUI dashboard for a VM or a hardware appliance that acts as the central point of management for all of the decoys, all of the lures, everything basically. Typically, if I delve into this product a little bit more with a partner, I can do a demo of the entire platform and show you some of these things in real time, and show you some of the charts and graphs and all that sort of stuff. We also have, just to add to that, we do have a central manager as well. So if you happen to have a big estate and you're deploying FortiDeceptor globally across, you know, regions and different appliances and stuff like that, virtual and hardware, we do have a central manager that can act as a single point of management, a single pane of glass for all of the deception that you have deployed within your environment.
Fabulous. Thank you, Malcolm. I think we're coming up on time. I think ending that actually is a definite go. Action is a demo. So I have put in a poll. If you'd like to have a demo, certainly contact your Integrity 360 account manager, alternatively Fortinet, and we can run through that with you. There's a handout also attached to this webinar. And what we're going to do is schedule the next webinar, hopefully in the next few weeks. And Malcolm, I'm sure this is the webinar that you might be doing a demo. I think that was the plan. But again, thank you everyone for today. And Malcolm, that was so interesting, and really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure. Thanks everyone for attending. Hope you found it very valuable, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar in the series.